I first spotted Thayer Whitcomb beneath the cracked eaves of Cedar Ridge Community Chapel, the small-town Idaho sky threatening thunder behind him like some kind of cinematic prophecy. He didn't see me at first. He was bent low over a splintered picnic table, sanding its surface with the concentration of a man trying to polish splinters out of his own past. The chapel had seen better days, flaking white paint, shingles curled like autumn leaves, and pews that creaked more than they welcomed. Still, it stood proud, just like him. His sleeves were rolled halfway up his forearms, exposing lean, wiry muscle dusted in cedar shavings. Sweat clung to his temple like a whispered prayer. He paused, arm flexed mid-stroke, and turned his head. That's when I saw his eyes glacier blue, hesitant but clear, like someone who always second-guessed himself, but never his God. He didn't smile right away, but when he did, it hit like sun through stained glass. New pastor, I remembered someone at the general store saying, fresh from seminary. Only 27, not yet hardened by the politics of congregations or the burden of too many stories told in confession. I was the opposite of new. 30, raised 3 counties over. A carpenter with splinters under every fingernail, more sawdust than scripture in my lungs. I'd been called in by the board to shore up the choir loft before it buckled under a Christmas cantata. When he spotted me approaching with my tool belt slung low and a level tucked under one arm, he straightened. "Pastor Whitcomb," he said, reaching out with a hand calloused just enough to surprise me. I took it. His grip was firm, but his skin still held the grit of the sandpaper. A faint red scrape bloomed across my palm. I didn't flinch. "Hollis Dane, you've got rot up in your rafters." "I've been told," he said, lips twitching. "Could use some strength up in the loft." I almost said I could use some in my knees, but I swallowed it. Instead, I nodded. My pulse was already breaking rhythm like hymnals in a gust of wind. We worked all afternoon, suspended between rafters and resonance. I measured and drilled. He steadied beams and asked good questions. Every time he lifted a plank overhead, his shirt pulled tight across his back, sleeves hugging arms that looked deceptively delicate from afar. Every time I hammered down a nail, I felt him watching. Not boldly, more like he was trying to solve a riddle I didn't know I was posing. There was a rhythm to it. The scrape of tools, the low murmur of his voice, the squeal of old wood finally giving way. But underneath it all, there was a humming, an energy that vibrated just beneath my skin, just out of reach. We paused once, water bottles in hand, sweat running down our temples in matching beads. "You ever live in a place like this?" he asked. "Grew up on the edge of one." "But no, I drift." He nodded, eyes drifting over the hills beyond the chapel. "I always thought I'd end up somewhere louder. Nashville, maybe Denver. And yet here you are, sanding splinters out of a table and trusting God with a leaking roof." He chuckled. "Feels like faith and foolishness are neighbors." Hey, before we go any further, if you're feeling this spark as fiercely as I did that day under the beams, go ahead and smash that like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment with your town. Let us know which pew of the world you're sitting in while love knocks sideways at your ribcage. Otherwise, how will we know who to pray for when devotion becomes desire? By dusk, the choir loft stood firm, bolted and level, proud, if a little bruised. But me? I wasn't standing steady at all. Thayer stood beside me, tools packed up, the light from the chapel windows turning his skin to candle glow. "You did good work," he said, laying a hand on my shoulder. It lingered. 2 beats past polite. My breath caught somewhere between lungs and lips. "Stay for Vespers?" he asked softly, voice low enough to almost be uncertain. My nod was more than acceptance. It was a confession. And I didn't even realize how deeply I'd meant it until we knelt side by side, later that evening, and the first spark of something unholy flickered between our joined hands in the dark. Cedar Ridge's evening service was lit only by oil lanterns, and what little moonlight the tall, narrow windows allowed to slip inside. Shadows trembled softly against the whitewashed walls. The pews groaned beneath tired knees, and dust hung in the air like incense. The choir didn't sing that night. No instruments. Just the hush of crickets through cracked panes, and Thayer's voice, low and melodic, rising from the pulpit like a secret being told one syllable at a time. He preached on Gideon. God doesn't always give you more. Sometimes he takes things away, whittles the army down, cuts your numbers, your options, until you're staring into a fight with just your bare hands and your bare faith. His words poured through me like warm cider on a cold night, unexpected, gentle, and burning somewhere deep behind my ribs. I sat in the back, arms crossed tight, but I couldn't stop listening, couldn't stop feeling him. After the benediction, the lanterns were left flickering and low. Congregants trickled out slowly, pausing to nod or murmur soft goodnights. I stayed seated, still, unsure if I was waiting for something divine or just for him. He found me where I sat, didn't say a word at first, just slid into the pew beside me, smelling faintly of cedar oil and the rain that was just beginning to tease the roof. Then, softly, "Pray with me." His voice wasn't performative. It was hesitant, vulnerable. Like the request itself cost him more than the sermon did. I nodded. We knelt at the altar, side by side on worn kneelers that creaked beneath our weight. The wood was hard against my knees, but I barely noticed. His shoulder brushed mine. Once. Twice. The third time, it stayed there, settled like it belonged. I could feel the heat of him through the fabric of his shirt. Could feel the tremble in his inhale. His whispered petition broke open between us. "Lord, give me strength." His voice cracked right at the end. Not broken, but bending, like the prayer wasn't just for show, like it had teeth. My lips parted, and before I even knew I was speaking, I whispered, "And grant me mercy if I take it away." He turned his head just slightly, eyes meeting mine in the dim lantern light. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. Outside, the storm broke. Rain clattered on the chapel roof like coins on metal. We rose slowly, shoulders still brushing, and stepped out beneath the steeple. He held out an umbrella he'd stashed beside the door, black, slightly bent, barely enough for two. But we made it work. Our heads were bent together under the canopy, our bodies close enough that my knuckles brushed his thigh with every step. The puddles beneath our feet shimmered in the amber light of the chapel, like liquid stained glass. We didn't speak as we walked, but his elbow kept bumping mine, not by accident. For a week, we worked shoulder to shoulder, reinforcing choir risers, repainting the trim in the fellowship hall, hauling boxes of old hymnals out of the basement and pretending we weren't both sweating through our shirts. I learned the exact moment he fell in love with my laugh. He blushed whenever I did it. He learned that I caught him stealing glances at my forearms. He'd look away fast, tongue brushing over his lower lip like it was involuntary. Like he didn't mean for it to happen, but couldn't stop it either. And I didn't call him out. Because God, I loved being looked at like that. I wanted to be wanted by someone like him, someone who prayed first, but felt everything louder than his faith could hold. One night, the generator kicked off during our last round of painting. Just a soft fizzle, a dimming hum, and then darkness. I was crouched on the floor, brushing eggshell white onto the baseboards. He was on the ladder, fixing a bulb. Then quiet. "Guess the old girl finally gave out," I muttered. He struck a match and lit a candle from the side table. The glow rose slowly across his face, warm and flickering. His eyes looked even bluer in it, somehow more naked. The chapel was empty, but for our breathing. He climbed down from the ladder, barefoot, candle in hand. "I've been praying for strength," he said, voice low, almost swallowed by the stillness. "But every time you smile..." He stopped, swallowed. My knees, weak. I finished for him. He didn't answer, just nodded. That one motion, small, broken, brave, felt like surrender and hunger stitched together. I stepped toward him slowly, With my free hand, I reached up and traced a dab of dried white paint on his jawline. He closed his eyes. His skin was warm beneath my thumb, his breath hitching. Maybe some weaknesses, I whispered, are holy. And then I kissed him. No angels sang. No choirs gasped. Just our lips meeting softly, then firmer, like two things that had always belonged together but never dared speak it aloud. He trembled. He caught my wrist, fingers trembling, but his grip sure, like a man who knew if he let go, he'd never forgive himself. Lightning flashed through the stained glass above the pulpit, casting fractured colors across our faces. Thunder answered in our chests. The candle flickered between us, wax pooling in his palm as his lips parted under mine, unsure but willing. We stood in the hush of pews and paint fumes and pent-up prayers. Kissing like we weren't sure it was allowed. Kissing like it didn't matter anymore. And it didn't. Because somewhere between the prayers and the rain and the red line on my palm from that first handshake, I'd stopped thinking about sin and started thinking about grace. The retreat took us deep into the pine belly of the Clearwater River Valley, all campfire smoke, river stones, and teenagers who forgot to be quiet at night. It was Thayer's idea. A weekend away, he said, loading the final cooler into the back of the rusted church van. Might do us all some good. I knew he meant the kids. I also knew, the way he looked at me from behind the steering wheel, that he didn't just mean the kids. We stayed in weather-worn cabins arranged in a crooked horseshoe. The chapel had rented the site for years, but to me, it all felt new. Every cracked plank and rusted latch held a kind of electricity, like something was waiting to happen. We played it cool. During meals, we sat at different tables. During devotions, we kept distance, just enough. But in the in-between moments, that's when things swelled. When he handed me a towel from the van, and our fingers brushed, too long. When I caught him watching me with a look like I just walked out of a dream he'd been praying against. And when the kids rushed down toward the river that second afternoon, towels flying, I stayed back to help him gather the hymn sheets that had blown from the picnic table. I forget how loud they are, he muttered, chuckling. You'll miss it when it's quiet again, I replied, eyes on him. You always sound like you've already lived this life and circled back to do it better. He said it so low I almost missed it. Then, want to swim? I blinked. Now, he nodded. They're upstream. We'll stay down here. 5 minutes. Just water. Just. But he didn't finish the sentence. We kicked off our shoes and waded in. The Clearwater lived up to its name. I could see every smooth stone, every flick of sunlight beneath the current. The cold bit at my ankles, then my thighs. But the moment he dunked under and came back up, slick hair, flushed cheeks, laughing like he was a boy again, I forgot to be cold. He pushed water toward me in slow ripples. I returned the favor. He came closer. Do it, he whispered. Baptize me. I didn't ask what he meant. I stepped closer until my hands framed his ribs. You sure? He nodded. Clean slate. I dunked him gently, palms steady on his chest and back, and when he surfaced, he rose into me, breath hitching, eyelashes dripping, mouth parted like he'd forgotten where he was and didn't care anymore. Our foreheads touched. His voice a breath. What are we doing, Hollis? Something inevitable. He kissed me. This one was different. The chapel kiss had been hunger. This was confession. Slow. Deep. So full of unspoken prayers that I nearly forgot the rest of the world existed. His hand slid to the small of my back beneath my wet shirt. Mine rose to cup his jaw, fingers tangling in damp hair. A bird cried out in the trees. A twig snapped somewhere behind us, a warning. We pulled apart, but not far. His eyes were wild, alive. We stood chest to chest in a river that had carved through rock for 1,000 years, holding each other like we were learning what worship could feel like without stained glass or scripture. And God, did it feel holy. It happened the night we returned from the river. The kids were asleep, finally. The last flashlight beam had faded beneath bunkhouse doors, and the chorus of soft snores and crickets created a kind of blanket over the entire camp. Stillness. Silence. The kind you only find far from cell towers and streetlights. Thayer met me by the fire pit. He didn't speak right away. Just passed me the last of the marshmallows, already half melted in the bag. We stood in the shadows, the embers glowing low, the smell of pine smoke and scorched sugar clinging to the air between us. "I can't pray this away," he said quietly, eyes locked on the fire. "I've tried." My chest tightened. What if it's not meant to be prayed away? He looked at me then, fully, finally. All the half-glances and swallowed words between us had led to this. "Come with me," he said. I followed him up the small ridge behind the bunkhouses, past the old chapel ruin the kids weren't allowed to explore, through the trees, up a slope of moss-covered rock, until we reached a weather-worn lookout cabin. No locks, just quiet and splinters and the ghosts of 100 past summer nights. He stepped inside. I stepped after. He closed the door behind me. And then he turned and kissed me like he'd been waiting his whole life to forget the rules. No hesitation. No trembling. His hands framed my jaw with reverence. My arms circled his waist, drawing him in like gravity, like gospel. We stumbled backwards together, lips searching, learning, finding rhythm. When his fingers slid beneath my shirt, they moved slow, like he was learning scripture by touch. When I tugged his hoodie over his head, it caught briefly on his curls. He laughed, soft, breathless, and then kissed me again with more need, less fear. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The cot creaked beneath us as we fell into each other, limbs tangled, mouths hungry but careful. There was no rush, no frantic fumbling, just the steady unfolding of one man into another, all consent, all fire, all vulnerability. He whispered my name against my neck like it was a psalm. Hollis. And I held his face in my hands, whispering back, "I've got you." Our shirts hit the floor. Then his fingers found the buttons on my jeans. Slowly, deliberately, like opening a door he'd knocked on for months. The moonlight through the window painted silver lines across his skin, his chest rising fast, his pupils blown wide. My thumb brushed the corner of his lips. He kissed it, then kissed down my throat, to my shoulder, to the hollow where my breath hitched. We moved like worship, slow, deep, quiet. When he finally settled above me, skin on skin, hand clasped in hand, it wasn't lust. It was surrender. It was devotion made flesh. We rocked, breathed, trembled. There were moans, hushed, aching, like hymns no one dared sing aloud. There was sweat and breath and softness. There was a point, mid-motion, mid-whisper, where I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of me. Not of this. Afterward, he lay on my chest, heart thudding like drums behind glass. His voice was barely audible. "So this is what peace feels like." I didn't answer. Just ran my fingers down the length of his spine until he shivered. And then he kissed me again, slower now, mouth warm and open, like we had all night to keep discovering each other. Outside, the wind moved gently through the pines. Inside, I was holding a man who once begged God for strength, and had given me his weakness instead. And I cherished it like a blessing. I woke before he did. The first gray light of dawn was seeping through the cracked window panes of the old lookout cabin, casting faint gold on the floorboards, on the bare wood walls, on him. Thayer. His cheek rested against my chest, one hand splayed across my stomach, like he was keeping me from drifting too far. His lips were slightly parted, breath slow and steady. One of his legs was tucked between mine, warm and heavy. Possessive in the way that didn't ask permission, only offered trust. He looked so young like that. Not in years, in peace. Like a boy who hadn't yet learned what it meant to pretend. I lay still for a long time, just watching the light move across his back, watching the soft rise and fall of someone I'd once promised myself I wouldn't touch. And now he was wrapped around me like I'd always been meant to hold him. The chapel bell rang in the valley below, just once. A soft warning. Morning prayers in 45 minutes. He stirred slightly, pressed his nose to my chest, murmured something that might have been my name, or just the kind of sound you make when sleep and safety mix together. I stroked his hair, slow and absent. My fingers found the softest spot behind his ear and stayed there. He sighed. "You're awake," I whispered. A small smile tugged at his mouth. "I've been awake. Just didn't want to stop this." "You don't have to." His eyes fluttered open. Those glacier blues again, still fogged with sleep, but clearer than I'd ever seen them. He looked at me like I was a place he didn't think he'd ever be allowed to visit, and now that he was here, he didn't know how to leave. "Last night," he whispered, "I didn't feel afraid." "Because it wasn't wrong," I said. He nodded. We stayed there, wrapped around each other, for another handful of sacred minutes. No rush. No guilt. Just skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat, and the steady unfolding of something whole. Eventually, he sat up and reached for his hoodie, but then stopped, turned back to me, eyes suddenly full. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I sat up too, hand finding his knee. No, not even for a second. He exhaled like I'd given him permission to breathe again. "I want more," he said. "Not just of you. Of this. Of mornings like this one. You can have them. All of them." His smile turned to a laugh, quiet, disbelieving, grateful. We dressed slowly, touching between each movement, buttoning shirts with fingers that lingered too long, helping each other with sleeves like we didn't want the softness to end. As we stepped outside, the early morning chill bit at our damp hair, but he took my hand without hesitation. Just for a moment. Just until we reached the edge of the ridge, where the world opened up in pine and sky. Below, the bell rang again, 2 notes this time. "You think they'll know?" he asked. "They might guess. They might whisper. Would you care?" I turned to him, brushing my thumb across his lower lip, just once. "Not if I get to keep this," I said. He leaned in, kissed me slow, not like the night before, but like we'd already survived something. And maybe we had. The valley glowed beneath us, gold and green and quiet. The day was waiting. But for a few more minutes, we stood together at the edge of it, not rushing. Because love, real love, doesn't always come in lightning. Sometimes it comes in morning light, in a held gaze, in the pause after a kiss, in the kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. The congregation gathered slowly that Sunday, their Sunday best creased and modest, the wooden pews groaning beneath familiar bodies. Cedar Ridge Community Chapel still smelled of pine cleaner and old hymnals. The same cracked plaster arched across the ceiling. The same little choir loft I'd rebuilt with my hands. But everything had changed, especially him. Thayer stood at the pulpit with his palms pressed to the worn edge, knuckles pale, mouth soft with nerves. He looked younger and older all at once, like a man who had finally decided to tell the truth, no matter what it cost. I sat near the back again, like I always did, but this time I didn't slouch or shift the shadows. I watched him, because I needed him to know, no matter what he said next, I was staying. He cleared his throat. "Before we open our hymnals this morning," he began, voice steady but quiet, "I have a confession." You could feel it. That inhale that runs through a whole room when something real is about to be said. He looked around, eyes brushing across familiar faces, then landing just briefly on me. "I've preached about strength, about surrender, about walking in truth even when it costs you." His fingers curled slightly on the pulpit's edge. "But I've kept something hidden, something I didn't trust this room to hold." A few murmurs rustled in the back. He breathed deep. I fell in love. More murmurs now. One audible gasp. With someone kind. Someone who taught me what it means to show up whole, not just holy. Someone I prayed against, and then prayed for. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. And I won't ask forgiveness for that love. Because it has made me softer. stronger, honest. He stepped back from the pulpit, gaze scanning the room. I understand this may break things for some of you, but I won't pretend anymore. I'm still me, and I still believe. But I believe, now with my whole heart, not just the half I used to offer. No one spoke. No one moved. Then from the third pew, Mrs. Estelle Bremer, 84, sharp-tongued and loyal to the marrow, stood up with her cane and simply said, "Amen." A breath seemed to release across the chapel. Not applause. Not acceptance. But room. Room for something new. Room for something true. After the service, people lingered awkwardly, unsure of the shape of things now. But a few nodded. A few smiled with their eyes. No one left in anger. That was enough. That night, Thayer knocked on my cabin door. He didn't wait to be invited in. He just stepped close and rested his forehead against mine like we'd done beneath the trees that night. But now, there was no fear left in him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me be weak, for making it holy." I brushed his cheek. "For me, your weakness was the miracle." He kissed me then, not hungrily, not desperately, but fully, his hands on my chest, mine at the back of his neck. We moved toward the bed like we had 1,000 nights ahead of us. We undressed slowly, reverently, touching like men who'd already known each other, and now got to do it without flinching. Every caress was more deliberate. Every kiss lasted a breath longer. When I laid him down and he reached up for me, there was no hiding. No second-guessing. Only two men choosing. Choosing love. Choosing light. Choosing each other. We didn't need words. The way our bodies met said everything. Later, when he curled against me, breath warm on my shoulder, I whispered the question I'd been holding onto for weeks. "Do you still pray for strength?" He nodded. "But I thank God for weakness too," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my chest. "Especially the kind that leads me back to you." In the stillness of that moment, beneath the weight of truth, of risk, of love unhidden, I realized something. We weren't laying hands to heal anymore. We were laying them to stay, to hold, to keep, to love out loud. Forever, if we were lucky.